We're joined right now by Tom Belger. He's the editor of Labour List. Good morning to you.
Morning, good to be with you.
Well, lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much. Before we get on to the working, New Deal for working people, can I just ask you your reaction to the Tory leadership contest? Latest ballot yesterday. It was rather a shock result. James Cleverly coming top in the third ballot on Tuesday, and then going third and falling out of the race yesterday. The final two candidates, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. Some Labour MPs were quoted as saying that they thought this was a gift to Labour. What do you make of it?
I saw that, yeah, and people joking maybe it should be declared. Really remarkable turn of events. It does look like, or at least people are reporting it, as a kind of cock-up by supporters of Cleverly. And as you say, a lot of Labour folk who will have seen Cleverly as potentially the biggest threat in the centre ground. You know, there's a kind of conventional wisdom that elections are won in the centre ground. That's why a lot of Labour people will be feeling quite pleased.
Well,
Having said that, there is another... Sorry, go on.
No, carry on. Apologies. I thought you'd finished. Sorry.
That's all right. There is another school of thought that Kemi's potentially dangerous. You know, you saw some people dangerous to Labour. You saw some people arguing she can connect potentially with voters. The big question, though, is, you know, some of her more offensive comments, are they going to alienate far more people than...
Offensive? What she said that's offensive?
What she said that's offensive? There's a long list. I don't have them to hand, but there was one about maternity pay, maternity leave.
Well, was it offensive? I mean, she was giving an opinion. She says it wasn't what she meant. Well, are you referring to her talking about some cultures? You know, she doesn't rate. They're not valid. Did that offend you?
So I haven't seen those comments, I'm afraid.
Front page news at one point about a week ago. But there we are. I don't know what she's ever said that's offensive. I mean, you can disagree with what she says. Or is this just Labour code for someone said something I didn't like?
You know, she said maternity leave had gone too far, which is a pretty remarkable thing to say.
Is that offensive?
Well, I mean, maybe offensive is the wrong word. She has said a lot of offensive things, but I've
asked you for them, and you've named one, and I don't think that's an offensive thing to say. I don't agree with her. I think there are some... I mean, I know some people, again, who've taken the mick on something of maternity leave. I don't think maternity pay is excessive. That's for darn sure. You can't pay your rent on your maternity pay. But I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by what that she says offensive things.
Yeah, well, there was the one recently. I can't remember exactly what she said, but again, something about care workers wiping bottoms. You know,
that's what care workers do. I visited my aunt in a care home many a time, and that's one of the main jobs care workers have. A lot of people who can't get out of bed.
Absolutely, and the offence was about giving proper, decent respect to those workers rather than seemingly dismissing it.
She wasn't. I read the full quote. She definitely wasn't dismissing it.
Okay, all right.
No,
well,
all you need
to do is have a quick Google to see a litany of things.
Offensive things that Kemi Badenoch has said. I'm fascinated by this. I think some people just kind of like to look for offence if someone just says something they don't agree with. Not agreeing with someone isn't the same thing as someone saying something offensive. Do you understand the concept?
Either way, there's a lot of people who she's certainly not to their taste. So the big question is, you know, is she going to alienate more people or win more ground?
Yeah. Again, a lot of people be arguing about, you know, when people talk about the centre ground in politics, that the centre ground has shifted so far to the left that it's actually the so-called right-wing headbangers in the Tory party are actually representing most ordinary people, including, frankly, an awful lot of Labour voters who want things like, you know, people to go to prison if they commit crime and not to have mass legal and illegal immigration. Those aren't extreme views. That seems to be the two things that they feel most strongly about.
No, although I'm not sure most people would say the centre ground is to the left. You know, there's a lot of Labour supporters on our side aren't happy with how much Labour's doing what most people would see as the centre ground, as you say.
Yeah, but they're hard left. They're not centrist. They're hard left. The cafe-wearing hard left. But, you know, let's come back to what Labour's announcing today. Angela Rayner's New Deal for working people. We've been talking about it since 10 o'clock. People have got the details. Basically, more rights to workers, but from day one, there's talk about there will be a sort of probationary period for 9 months for people, so bosses can still have the option, perhaps, of dismissing someone they don't think is a good fit or turned out not to live up to their CV and interview expectations. But why do workers need more rights on this front? When businesses are saying we are struggling already with red tape, we're struggling to hire people. Why are you giving workers more rights, which will actually make it harder and more expensive for employers to take on more people?
Well, look, it's always a balance, isn't it, between, supporting business and supporting workers. But we've had a heck of a wage squeeze for the best part of 10 years, over 10 years. A lot of people really, really feeling the cost of living crisis. And, when the minimum wage was brought in, there was a big outcry, people suggesting this is going to cost jobs.
Yeah.
Actually, employers seem to have been able to pay it. So, given how much inflation has soared, given how, over decades, you've seen workers' rights eroded and a lot less protections at work than people had decades ago. There's quite a strong argument, I would say, for addressing the balance. We've got some of the most restrictive anti-union laws, apparently, in...
Well, they're not restrictive anti-union laws. You just have to have a majority of people who actually are members of the union voting for a strike. I don't see that that's restrictive. It's perfectly reasonable.
There's a load of laws that have been a lot more restrictive across the board compared to many years ago.
Well, it's more restrictive, but I mean, it's not unfair. It's not unreasonable. Most people would not think those rules were unreasonable. That you need to have majority support. You can't just have 6 blokes sitting in the canteen going, yeah, we're all out, everyone out.
I totally agree. I think a lot of union supporters would totally agree, and the unions themselves would say, yeah, we need a majority of supporters to back it. But some of the stuff is, antiquated laws about not being able to do online ballots. That would mean you can actually have proper representative votes.
Yeah, OK, well, there are things like that. But again, in the big scheme of things, I mean, I'm a big fan of the minimum wage, and I always argued personally with George Osborne about this. We're going to lose a load of jobs. If you can't pay a decent wage to your lowest paid worker, you probably aren't very good at running a business, would be my view. But there are a lot of people who are good business people, men and women who've struggled. They've set up a business, they're employing people, they treat their workers well, they consider them, part of their extended family, and they're saying, look, if I want to take someone new on, if I'm going to face... Basically, if I take them on and I get it wrong, if they don't live up to expectations, I basically can't get rid of them unless I pay thousands in legal fees and dealing with red tape for ages, going through a tribunal and the like, when they claim unfair dismissal, when actually they just didn't fit the office. I'm not going to take that person on. And particularly also, there's a lot of rumours that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, she's got a big black hole to fill, we're told. She's looking at an increase to national insurance for employers, which is, as we were discussing earlier, quite literally a tax on jobs. We just simply, you can't help the workers by hurting business. You help business, you help workers by providing more jobs.
Well, there's a couple of things there, aren't there? I think the reason this Labour government's got elected, I would say, is that I think voters like that balance they're striking between saying we want to support workers, but also we do want to support business more than the party was suggesting it would under Corbyn. I think on the... what was the first point you made?
Because whether they're going to want to take people on or not.
About whether they take people on, about unfair dismissal. I think a lot of people think it's pretty unfair that if you get sacked for no good reason, you literally have no right to the law. It's a basic thing in this country with crime, isn't it? That
here's the thing: how many bosses
action to protect yourself?
How many bosses do you think? It costs money to recruit people. It can often cost thousands to get an employment agency. It costs time and effort to try and take someone on. You take someone on, you train them up, they're part of the company, you do all the paperwork. Are you seriously saying that bosses are just willy-nilly just getting rid of people just on a random whim? Of course they're not. Most employers are crying out for staff right now.
Sure, absolutely. But that's not to say people don't deserve rights. People have all sorts of rights at work. And this is just about saying, most employees who've been there longer than 2 years, we already have these rules in place.
Yeah, they have it because they've established a relationship. They've established that they are who they say they are and they do what they said they do. And the employer and the employee have a relationship of trust then. But that's different.
You're right. And I guess there's two things there. I guess the first is that in terms of access to tribunals, the government has, I think the past government made it more difficult to people to get access to tribunals. There is an argument, that both employees and employers, that those costs should be a bit cheaper. So if worst case these things do end up there, you're not facing punitive costs on both sides. But also Labour's back down on this. They have, it looks as though they're going to end up with longer probation periods than initially thought. And they're going to properly consult on this to make sure they can find that right balance, because they do want to support business. This is...
but you don't support business by putting extra costs on them. You just don't. Can I ask you just finally, we've got to leave it here, but take a break. But all very strange, this story involving Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, getting a freebie ticket, as apparently everybody in the world did but me, to the Taylor Swift concert via her husband Ed Balls, former, of course, Labour cabinet minister himself, now a TV presenter, weirdly getting to interview Labour Prime Minister, which I find utterly bizarre. But anyway, well, even his own wife even. She got a freebie ticket. She didn't declare it until only just now, but she got a ticket to the same concert which Yvette Cooper attended, and Taylor Swift got very expensive police sort of outriders, the sort of treatment we give to a foreign dignitary, to the King, to the Prime Minister when they're travelling around London to get to Wembley. Does that suggest that she has been interfering somewhat in police affairs, day-to-day affairs, and that she got a freebie benefit from it?
Look, I mean, I think the idea that £170 ticket, I think that was the cost quoted, is going to influence Yvette Cooper to intervene. I think is probably for the birds. But these things aren't just about the rules; it's about how it looks. And the fact we're having this conversation means it probably wasn't the best PR move for the government on it. On the flip side, though, you could say, well, you know, look, if the issue was Taylor Swift saying, look, I haven't got enough security to do this, and making a kind of public criticism of the government over it, given what we've seen in the past, in the Ariana Grande concert, it'd probably be seeing criticism of the government for not taking firm action.
Ariana Grande, it wasn't an attack on Ariana Grande. It was, the security that was needed was for Taylor Swift fans and that Manchester Ariana Grande fans.
Yeah.
Well, OK, we'll leave it there. Tom Belger, editor of Labour List, thank you very much. You should see Russell Quirk's face during that. Can we really... You've got a minute just before we go to a break.
I despair, Julia Hartley-Brewer. I despair. First of all,
you gave me my full name like I was being told off.
Yeah, no. So first of all, I this morning submitted a Freedom of Information request to Metropolitan Police to ask exactly what the cost
who designed
the cost of that motorcade was, and I also want to see the correspondence, of course, between ministers and the police in that regard, because of course it was massive overreach, and I'm sure not connected at all to the free tickets that most of the Labour front bench received. I don't know where to start really with Tom Belger. I mean, look, why on earth, as you rightly said, why on earth would an employer sack someone for absolutely no reason? And not just because of the cost of recruiting and getting that person into productivity.
Again, that's people who've never run a business.
But there's a thing now in business which is well-versed, which is culture, right? You have a nice culture.
Everyone gets on.
Culture breeds productivity. We don't need this state overreach. We don't need this nonsense telling businesses. But
also you can have people who don't fit in and just rub everyone up the wrong way. It's like, you know what, there's nothing wrong with your work, but actually people would all be happy if you weren't here.
I know.
This could happen at our office at any moment.
And on the Kemi thing, it's a bit like when you ask people if they think Nigel Farage is a racist, and they say yes, and you say, can you give me one example? And they can't.
I know, exactly. It was very bizarre, wasn't it? That, the offensive comments that she makes, but he couldn't think of one.